That day began like any other, until one act of kindness changed everything. What started as a chance meeting between two strangers became a story the whole city would remember. Before we begin, subscribe and turn on the bell. Here, we tell stories that prove compassion can rise from the most unexpected places. Intro Summary. In a remote village in West Africa, Chief Kofi ruled with wisdom, tradition and an iron will, but his daughter Amara had always felt trapped between two worlds. While her father groomed her to lead their people, preparing her for a destiny written centuries before her birth, she dreamed of another life. A life where she could choose, a life where her voice mattered for its own sake, not as an extension of a crown. At 22, after years of quiet rebellion, she fled under the cover of darkness, leaving behind a handwritten letter and a life of privilege for the uncertain, terrifying streets of Lagos. For 3 long years, no one heard from her. Her father searched relentlessly, hiring trackers, sending messengers across borders, his heart fracturing with each passing season. Her mother wept in the chambers of the palace, convinced her only daughter had perished. The village whispered that Amara had abandoned her people, her heritage, her sacred name, that she had chosen selfishness over duty, freedom over family. What they didn't know was that Amara was alive in the sprawling chaos of Lagos, working as a live-in maid for a wealthy businessman's family, hidden in plain sight, scrubbing marble floors until her knees bled, washing clothes in the scorching sun of the servants' courtyard, preparing meals she would never eat with the family, sleeping in a cramped room in the servants' quarters while longing echoed through the walls. But fate moves quietly, patiently, like water finding its way through stone, a chance encounter in a rain-soaked market. A glimpse of a familiar face, a father's instinct that refuses to die, that refuses to accept silence as an answer. This is the story of how a daughter's humility and a father's persistence rewrote what it means to truly see each other, and how sometimes the greatest act of love is learning to let go. Chapter 1. The Weight of Crowns. Chief Kofi sat on his throne of woven wood and carved stone, watching the sunset bleed across the savannah like a fresh wound. The sky was burning, orange and crimson and gold, and the light fell across his weathered face in patterns that made him look older than his 62 years. His daughter Amara stood beside him, as she had every evening for 22 years, her posture impeccable, her expression carefully neutral, the way he had taught her to be, the way a chief's daughter was supposed to always be. The throne room was empty except for them. The guards stood outside the wooden doors, and the evening sounds of the village, children laughing, women singing as they prepared dinner, the distant bleating of goats, filtered through the walls like whispers from another world. "Tomorrow the elders gather," Chief Kofi said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of generations, the burden of 1,000 years of tradition compressed into each syllable. "They will discuss your betrothal. The Okonkwo family from the north. They are honorable people. Their son, Kwame, is strong. He has studied in Accra. He speaks English and understands modern business. They will protect our alliance. They will strengthen our position." Amara's fingers trembled against her wrapper, though she tried to hide the movement by smoothing the fabric against her leg. She had known this moment was coming. In her village, daughters were not burdens, they were investments. Treaties written in flesh and blood, alliances sealed with vows and ceremonies. She was 22, classically beautiful, with her mother's high cheekbones and her father's commanding eyes. She was educated, fluent in Twi, English and French, after 5 years at boarding school in the city. She was the perfect prize, the perfect tool. But inside her chest, something was breaking. Something small and fragile and essential was fracturing like glass under pressure. "Father, she began. Her voice small, uncertain, the voice of a girl trying to find the courage to speak truth to power. He raised his hand, and the gesture was both gentle and absolute. A chief's daughter does not question. She accepts, she leads, she sacrifices. His eyes, kind but immovable as stone, met hers. This is your duty, Amara. This is your birth. This is what the ancestors demand of you. The Okonkwo alliance is essential for our people. You understand this. It was not a question. It was a statement of fact, as final as the setting sun. That night, Amara lay in her bed and could not sleep. She listened to the night sounds of the village. The wind moving through palm trees, the distant call of night birds, the soft snoring of the woman who slept in the adjoining chamber, a cousin there to keep her company. She thought about Kwame Okonkwo, whom she had met once at a funeral 3 years ago. He had been handsome enough, respectful enough. He would make a fine husband, probably, but he was not her choice. He was not her life. She rose before dawn. In the darkness, she packed a single bag, a change of clothes, a book of poetry, her school certificates wrapped in plastic. She had been saving money for years, small amounts hidden away from her allowance, wages from tutoring the children of wealthy tourists who visited the nearby city, 200,000 naira, enough to disappear. She wrote her father a letter in careful script, each word chosen deliberately. Father, forgive me. I cannot be what you need me to be. I must find out who I am when no one is watching, when no title defines me. I cannot marry Kwame. I cannot sit on a throne or wear a crown, or be the thing everyone else has already decided I should be. I love you, but I must leave. Please try to understand. Amara. She did not sign it with her full name. Signatures could be traced. Signatures were too permanent, too definitive. She walked to the highway at dawn, her heart a fist clenched inside her ribs, her throat tight with tears she would not allow herself to shed. The first truck to pass was a cargo vehicle heading south. She climbed into the back, surrounded by sacks of cassava and chickens in cages, and did not look back. By evening, she was in Lagos, a sprawling city of 20 million people, a place where a girl could disappear entirely if she was willing to work hard enough. Chapter 2. The City of Forgotten Names. Lagos swallowed her like the ocean swallows a stone. The city was unlike anything Amara had imagined. It was vast and chaotic and indifferent in a way that was both terrifying and liberating. There were no elders watching her, no ancestors judging her decisions, no one who knew her name or her family or her supposed destiny. For the first week, she slept in a hostel in Barika, a crowded room filled with other displaced people. Women from the north, men from rural villages, all of them seeking something in the city's anonymous vastness. The money drained quickly. 7,000 naira per night for a bed in a room that smelled like sweat and kerosene and desperation. The other residents were not unkind, but they were not kind either. They were simply surviving, moment to moment, day to day. She walked through neighborhoods looking for work, her pristine English and French a liability rather than an asset in poor areas where education meant potential exploitation. No papers, no references, no story. Just a young woman with careful hands, sad eyes, and a determination born of desperation. She tried a factory, but the manager wanted to know her history, where she was from, whether her family was looking for her. She left. She tried a restaurant, but they asked for documents, for a national identification card, for proof of citizenship. She walked out. At a market in Lekki, near the wealthy neighborhoods where mansions sat behind high walls and guards patrolled the streets, a woman named Mrs. Oladell approached her. Mrs. Oladell was perhaps 50, with kind eyes and a reputation in the domestic worker circles as a fair employer. She was looking for help. Her housemaid position was becoming too much for one person. The pay was small, but there would be food and a room in the servants' quarters. Steady work, safety of a sort. "What is your name?" Mrs. Oladell asked, studying her with the keen eye of someone who had seen many lost girls pass through the city. Amara hesitated. Her name was a key that could unlock her past, could bring trackers and police and questions she wasn't ready to answer. Her name was also a crown, a weight, an expectation that followed her like a shadow. Ada, she whispered, choosing a name that meant daughter in Igbo, a name that belonged to no one specific, that meant everything and nothing at the same time. My name is Ada. Well, Ada, Mrs. Oladell said, can you work hard? Yes, she said, I can work hard. Can you keep quiet, not gossip with the other workers, not steal from the household, not cause problems? Yes, Amara said again. I can do all of that. Mrs. Oladell hired her on the spot. The mansion belonged to Mr. Adeyemi, a successful oil executive in his mid-50s with a wife, 2 teenage children, and a lifestyle that required constant maintenance. Ada moved into a small room in the servants' quarters, a concrete structure behind the main house, shared with 2 other workers. The room was perhaps 3 meters by 3 meters, with a narrow bed, a small table, and a window that looked out onto the back wall of the compound. It was the smallest space she had ever lived in, and it felt like freedom. She woke at 4 in the morning. She scrubbed the marble floors of the mansion on her hands and knees, the cold stone pressing into her skin as she worked. She cooked meals from recipes Mrs. Oladell had taught her: jollof rice, pepper soups, stewed meats, fried plantains. She washed clothes in massive piles, her hands pruned and raw, her back bent like an old woman's after hours bent over the washing basin. She cleaned bathrooms, she organized closets, she prepared breakfast that she would not eat. She served lunch to people who did not make eye contact with her. In the evenings, she ate what remained, the scraps from the family's plates, cold food, often unappetizing combinations of leftovers. For 3 years, she moved through the mansion like a ghost, visible but unseen, present but unnoticed, part of the household machinery, but not part of the family. But in this invisibility, she discovered something unexpected and profound: peace. No one expected her to be perfect in the way they had expected her to be perfect at home. No one was grooming her for anything. No one was writing her future in stone. In the servants' quarters, she could read late into the night by candlelight, poetry, history, novels she borrowed from a small library in a neighboring community center. She could think. She could listen to her own thoughts. She could simply exist as herself, uncomplicated by duty or expectation. There was dignity in honest work, she realized. There was freedom in being truly forgotten by everyone except those who depended on your labor. Still, sometimes she would stand in the kitchen while the family ate in the dining room, listening to their laughter, their casual conversations about school and business and vacation plans, and her chest would ache with a longing she could not name. Not a longing to be them, but a longing to be seen as equally worthy of happiness, equally deserving of a life she had chosen for myself. Chapter 3. The Rain and the Truth. 3 years after Ada disappeared into the city, Chief Kofi finally received a clue, a fragment of possibility so small and fragile that he almost missed it entirely. A trader from Lagos had come to the village, a man named Igbo who dealt in imported goods and had known Amara during her school days before everything changed. Over palm wine and cola nuts in the chief's quarters, in the evening when the light was turning gold, Igbo mentioned, almost casually, that he thought he had seen a young woman who resembled Amara 3 years ago, perhaps 4. The memory was imprecise. She had been working as a maid in a mansion in Lekki, Igbo said. He had seen her at a market near the neighborhood, carrying groceries, her hands rough, her clothes simple. The resemblance had struck him then, but he had dismissed it. Too improbable, too impossible. But now, telling the story to the chief, the memory felt more certain. The way she had moved, the shape of her face, something familiar that had nagged at him for years. Chief Kofi listened without interrupting, his entire body focused on these fragments of information. The woman beside him, his wife, Amma, had gone very still. "Are you certain it was her?" the chief asked quietly. "No," Ibo admitted, "but certain enough that I felt I should tell you, certain enough that it might be worth investigating. She was alone. She seemed peaceful, actually, not distressed, simply working." After Ibo left, Chief Kofi sat in silence for a very long time. He thought about his daughter, whom he had raised to be strong and dutiful. He thought about the letter she had left, the words that had wounded him at the time, but that he had read hundreds of times since, searching them for hidden meanings, for some indication of where she had gone. He made a decision that would have shocked his village, that would have been considered undignified by the elders. He arranged his affairs. He transferred leadership to his eldest son, a capable man, a practical man. He wrote letters explaining his absence, and he prepared to travel south, alone, without guards, without retinue, to a city he had never seen, to search for a daughter who no longer existed. He arrived in Lagos on a Tuesday during the rainy season. The sky wept continuously. Torrential downpours that turned the streets into rivers of mud and refuse and floating debris. The city was overwhelming. The noise, the crowds, the endless energy and chaos. He wore traditional clothes that marked him as an outsider, that drew curious looks from passers-by. For 2 weeks he wandered through Lekki, asking carefully, describing his daughter without revealing exactly who he was or why he was searching. A young woman, perhaps 25 now, tall, educated, working as a maid. Have you seen her? Most people dismissed him. Some tried to scam him. A woman at a market stall. Someone whose own daughter had run away to the city years ago and been found working as a bar girl. Recognized something in his desperation. She gave him a name, an address. On Friday evening, as the rain fell in sheets and lightning split the sky, Chief Kofi stood outside an iron gate in a wealthy neighborhood and watched the compound beyond. He could see lights glowing in the windows. He could hear a dog barking in the distance. He could smell cooking, jollof rice and pepper soup, the same dishes his wife had taught his daughter to prepare. He had traveled nearly 1,000 kilometers. He had risked his dignity and his position. He had opened himself to ridicule and failure. He was standing at the threshold of something that might change everything or might lead nowhere at all. And he was terrified. What if she did not want to be found? What if, in leaving him, she had also left behind the possibility of forgiveness? What if she had built a life here, a life that his presence would only disrupt? Comment where you're watching from. I want to see how far these stories of hope and redemption can travel. Chapter 4. Recognition. Ada was in the kitchen when she heard the commotion. She was preparing dinner, marinating chicken in spices, chopping vegetables with the efficient movements of someone who had performed the same task 10,000 times. Mrs. Oladell was speaking to the gateman in the courtyard. There was an argument of some kind, voices raised, the gateman's tone shifting from hostile to curious to slightly uncertain. A man's voice speaking English with an accent she recognized immediately, Twi-accented English. The inflection of home, the cadence of her childhood. Her knife froze mid-chop. She continued stirring the soup, her movements automatic, her mind suddenly elsewhere, pulled backward across 3 years and 1,000 kilometers. She had learned not to be curious. Curiosity led to questions. Questions led to conversations. Conversations led to being seen, to being known, to being called back to who she used to be. But something made her pause. Something in the timbre of that voice reached into her chest and squeezed her heart until she could barely breathe. She wiped her hands on her apron, a gesture so practiced it was nearly unconscious, and stepped toward the back door. The man stood in the rain, alone, his clothes clinging to his body. He was tall. dignified despite his drenched state, with shoulders that carried an invisible weight, the weight of kingship, of responsibility, of 3 years of searching. His hair was grey now, peppered with silver that hadn't been there when she left. His face was thinner, the lines around his eyes deeper, but his eyes were the same. Dark, searching, kind, infinitely sad. It was impossible. It was a dream, a hallucination born of longing. It was a cruel trick of memory made flesh. It was her father. For a moment, neither of them moved. The rain fell between them like a curtain, like a barrier, like all the distance and time that had accumulated since the night she had walked away. The world narrowed to this single point, a chief and a maid, separated by 3 years and a single gate, separated by choices made and unchosen, separated by all the ways they had failed to understand each other, and all the ways they were about to try again. Chief Kofi's eyes found hers, and in that instant, recognition bloomed like a flower opening to light. The shape of her face, though thinner now worn by work, the tremor in her shoulders. The way she held herself, a balance between pride and shame, between the person she had been and the person she had become. "Amara," he said, and her name broke like a prayer, like a question, like a plea for forgiveness. She shook her head slowly. "My name is Ada now, Father. Ada is who I am here. Ada is who I have become." "Then Ada is who I came to find," he said quietly. "Then Ada is who I am proud to see." Chapter 5. Beneath the surface, Chief Kofi stayed in Lagos for an entire week. Ada did not invite him into the servants' quarters. That would have caused too much attention, too many questions from Mrs. Oladell and the other workers. Instead, they met in a small restaurant near the market, a place that served simple food to working people, where no one asked questions and everyone was focused on their own lives and their own struggles. The restaurant smelled of frying oil and onions and palm soup. The walls were painted a faded yellow, decorated with calendars from previous years and advertisements for mobile phone credit. They sat at a plastic table in the corner, away from other diners, and Chief Kofi bought her lunch, rice and stew, nothing special, exactly what she would have prepared for the family servant's meal. On the first day, he simply watched her eat. He watched how carefully she moved, how she seemed almost surprised to have food provided for her without the expectation of immediate service. He watched her hands, rough from years of work, and felt his heart break again. "Why?" he asked finally, and that single word contained 3 years of questions. "Why did you leave? Why didn't you come home? Why did you choose this life? Why did you choose to disappear?" Ada stirred her rice, not meeting his eyes. She took a long time to answer. "Because I was drowning, Father," she said finally, "in tradition, in duty, in being the thing everyone else had already decided I should be, in having my life planned out by people who loved me but who didn't see me." She paused, gathering words. "Every day in the village I felt myself disappearing, bit by bit. The parts of me that wanted to choose, the parts that had questions, the parts that didn't fit into the shape they wanted to pour me into. And this." He gestured toward her simple dress, her work-worn hands, the modest meal they were sharing. "This is better? You are happy here?" "This is honest," she said. "No one here expects me to smile and nod and marry a stranger. No one here sees me as a treaty written in flesh and blood, a tool to maintain an alliance. I work, I eat, I sleep, I read books until midnight. I think my own thoughts. I'm no one to anyone." Her voice wavered slightly. "And that is freedom. That is the thing I couldn't find anywhere else." Chief Kofi was quiet for a very long time. Around them the restaurant moved with its own rhythm, vendors coming and going, other workers eating quietly, the sound of sizzling food from the kitchen, the murmur of distant traffic. He thought about his village. About the throne he had spent his entire adult life sitting on, about tradition as foundation and trap. He thought about his daughter, whom he had tried to sculpt into an image instead of allowing her to become herself. He thought about what it meant to love someone and to also harm them through that love. "I came to bring you home," he said finally. "I thought I could fix what I had broken by finding you. I thought if I could just locate you, I could repair things. I could convince you to come back. I could restore order." "You didn't break anything," Amara said, and when she looked at him, her eyes were clear and direct in a way they had never been when they lived under the same roof. "You just didn't understand, or you couldn't understand. Parents and daughters, we are always trying to give each other things the other person doesn't want. You gave me duty. I wanted freedom. I gave you absence. You wanted presence." She reached across the table and touched his hand, a gesture of tenderness and finality both. "I had to leave to know that I could. I had to disappear to discover who I actually am when no one is watching, when no title defines me. In running away, I found myself." "And who are you?" he asked, genuinely asking, genuinely wanting to know. "Who have you become, Ada?" She smiled, a small, fragile thing that was beautiful in its honesty. "I am still learning, Father. But I am learning as myself, not as the role everyone assigned to me. I am learning who I am when I get to choose. I am learning that my worth is not tied to my utility. I am learning that I can be loved simply for existing, not for being perfect or dutiful or beautiful or useful." She paused. "And that changes everything." On the final day of his visit, they walked through Lekki as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. They did not need to fill every silence with words. The silence was its own language, understanding, regret, acceptance, love, all compressed into the space between them. "When you're ready," Chief Kofi said, as they reached the gate of the mansion where she worked, "come home, not to be what I need, not to fulfill a duty or maintain an alliance, but to share who you have become, to show your mother that you survived, to teach your brother what it means to be free." He paused. "Your mother would like to meet Ada. She has only known Amara, and she has missed her every day." Ada embraced him, this man who had shaped her and whom she had shaped in return through her leaving. His clothes smelled like travel and rain, and the dust of roads walked in search of a daughter who was finally, truly found. If this story already touched your heart, hit the like button. It helps Ada's message reach more people who still believe in kindness. Chapter 6. Letters and Silence. After her father returned to the village, traveling north on a bus that took 2 days, carrying with him a daughter who was no longer lost because she had learned to find herself, Amara began to write. She wrote letters to her mother in careful script, each word chosen with deliberation, each sentence an attempt to bridge the distance of time and choice and pain. She described Lagos, the chaos of it, the beauty of it hidden beneath the noise, the way the city could break you or teach you, depending on how you approached it. She described her work, the dignity she had found in honest labor, the way it felt to know that she was valuable because of what she did, not who she was born to be. She wrote apologies for the silence. She wrote explanations for the pain she had caused. She wrote asking for forgiveness, knowing it might not come, knowing that some ruptures take years to heal if they ever truly do. She wrote, "I know I hurt you, Mama. I know my leaving was like a death to you, a kind of grief that doesn't have a name because I was not gone, just unreachable. But I want you to know that I am alive, that I am well, that I have become someone I like when I look at myself in the mirror. I wish you could be here to see it, but perhaps knowing about it is enough." She wrote about Ada as if Ada were a person separate from Amara, as if she were introducing her mother to a daughter she had never known. She wrote about the books she read, about her dreams, about a future she was beginning to imagine for herself. Her mother wrote back, her handwriting shaky with age and emotion. The letters came infrequently, sometimes months apart, as if her mother was learning to write to her again, as if the act of putting words on paper was itself a kind of healing. Her mother wrote about the village. She wrote about how, slowly, gradually, the tribe had learned to see Amara's departure not as betrayal, but as courage. She wrote about how a chief who had once demanded absolute obedience had learned, through the pain of loss and the joy of finding, to offer freedom instead. She wrote, "Your father is not the same man you left. None of us are. We have been remade by your absence, and in being remade, we have learned something we should have known all along, that love means letting go." 6 months after her father's journey to Lagos, Amara made a decision that would shape everything that came after. She asked Mr. Adeyemi for a leave of absence, a month, perhaps 2. She told him she needed to visit her family, to settle something in herself, to see a place she had not seen in 3 years. Mr. Adeyemi, who had learned over time to see Ada as a person rather than as background, granted it without hesitation. She told Mrs. Oladell she was going home, but not to stay permanently. She was going to visit, to be with her family, to show them who Ada had become, to introduce them to the woman she had built herself into. She packed her single bag again, the same worn canvas bag she had used to flee her village 3 years earlier. But now it was not filled with desperation and fear. It was filled with purpose. It contained books she had bought with wages she had earned, poetry, history, novels that had kept her company during long nights in the servants' quarters. It contained clothes she had chosen for herself, bought with money she had saved, that reflected her taste and personality. It contained gifts for her family, small things that meant something because she had chosen them herself, and things that said, "I was thinking of you, and I am still connected to you even though I chose to leave." On the bus ride north, she held a mirror up to her reflection and barely recognized the woman looking back. She was thinner than before, her face angular where it had once been soft with the fullness of youth. She was taller somehow, or perhaps just straighter, more confident in how she carried herself. Her hands were rough, her feet were calloused, her skin was darker from years of working in the sun. There were lines around her eyes that spoke of hardship and wisdom and a kind of peace she had not known before. She was not the girl who had fled in darkness, confused and desperate and unable to articulate why she felt so trapped. She was someone new. She was Ada. She was Amara. She was free. Chapter 7. The Return. The village recognized her, and did not recognize her at once. As the bus pulled into the square in the early morning, when the light was still pale and soft, word spread quickly. The chief's daughter had returned. The girl who had run away, the one who was lost, had been found. Elders gathered in the market square. Women who had known her as a child stepped forward as she descended from the bus, their eyes searching her face for the girl they remembered, struggling to reconcile that memory with this woman. Thinner, darker, harder somehow, but also softer. The roughness of experience had worn away something sharp in her and replaced it with something quieter and stronger. Chief Kofi stood beneath the ancient baobab tree, the same tree where he had sat with his own father when he was a boy, learning what it meant to lead. His hands were clasped before him, his eyes watchful and tender, his entire body vibrating with an emotion too large to contain. When Amara stepped from the bus, the crowd parted like water. She walked toward her father, and with each step, she felt the weight of 3 years lifting, not forgotten, not erased, but integrated, carried as part of her story, not as a shame to hide. Her mother stood slightly apart from the crowd, and when Amara saw her, she began to cry. Her mother had aged. There were more grey hairs, more lines around her eyes. She looked smaller somehow, or perhaps just more fragile, as if grief and hope had worn away everything unnecessary and left only the essential. They embraced for a very long time without speaking. Words seemed unnecessary and inadequate to the moment. That evening the village gathered to hear her speak. The elders, the families, even the children, they all came. She did not stand on a throne or hold a ceremonial position. She sat beneath the stars, on the earth at the same level as everyone else, and she told them about Lagos. She told them about the chaos of the city, about anonymity, and what it meant to not be known. She told them about working with her hands, about discovering that dignity has nothing to do with status and everything to do with how you treat yourself and others. She told them about reading in the dark and teaching herself things and learning who she was when no one was watching. "I left because I was afraid of the life you had chosen for me," she said, speaking slowly, wanting them to understand. "But in leaving, I realized something important. I was also choosing. I chose to work. I chose humility. I chose to learn who I was beneath the title of chief's daughter, beneath the expectations of an entire village." She looked at her father, and he met her eyes with an expression of such profound love and acceptance that she almost lost her composure. "And I learned that the greatest gift a parent can give is not a plan. It is not a path laid out in stone. It is the freedom to become yourself, even if that self is not what the parent expected or wanted." She paused, letting that sink in. "I came back not because I have decided to return to the life I left. I came back because I wanted to see you all again, because I wanted to bridge the distance, because I wanted to show you that I survived, that I more than survived. I learned to live." She gestured toward her parents. "My father came to find me in Lagos. He traveled to a city he had never seen, to a place he didn't understand, to search for a daughter he had hurt by loving her in the only way he knew how. That taught me something too, that growth is possible at any age, that parents and children can both change, that love can be remade." Her mother wept quietly, pride and sorrow and joy mingling in her tears like colors in water. Chapter 8. The New Bridge. 3 months later, Amara returned to Lagos, but this time she did not return as someone running away. She did not return as someone trying to escape the past or prove something or rebel against authority. She returned as someone running toward a future she was building herself. She continued working for Mr. Adeyemi, but she also began to teach. Using money from her savings and with help from a community center director who recognized something special in her, she started an evening school in a community center near the mansion, offering free classes to girls from the streets, girls like she might have become if she hadn't been fortunate enough to receive an education, if she hadn't had the resources to escape her circumstances. She taught them English and mathematics, but more importantly, she taught them something deeper. She taught them that their circumstances did not define their possibilities. She taught them that a girl born into poverty could educate herself. She taught them that power, real power, came not from being born into privilege, but from claiming agency over your own life. She wrote letters to her father describing her students, their dreams, their struggles. She wrote, "There is a girl named Aif who wants to be a doctor. She is sleeping in her mother's market stall at night and studying during the day. Every time I see her, I think of all the girls who will never get the chance I had. I am trying to be that chance for them." Her father wrote back, no longer commanding but asking what she needed, asking how he could support this work, asking finally and genuinely who his daughter had become and what she needed to become even more. Chief Kofi used his influence and his connections to help her establish a scholarship fund. He reached out to wealthy people, to government officials, to other chiefs and business people. He told them about his daughter, the chief's daughter who had run away and worked as a maid and discovered her own worth through humility. Amara's story spread through the village and eventually through the region. Journalists came to interview her. Radio stations featured her story. Young women began to see in her journey a reflection of their own longing, that sometimes running away was not always failure. Sometimes it was the first act of courage. Sometimes it was the only way to find yourself. A year after her father's journey to Lagos, Amara stood in the courtyard of the mansion, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. The same colors she had watched every evening for 3 years, but now they meant something different. She was not scrubbing floors. She was preparing lesson plans for tomorrow's class. She was writing an essay about dignity and what it meant to be truly seen. She was planning the next phase of her scholarship fund. She was building something that would outlast her, that would ripple outward and touch lives she would never know about. Her phone buzzed, a message from her father, sent from the village where he sat on his throne, or perhaps sat under the baobab tree, thinking of his daughter. "Amara, I am proud of the woman you have chosen to become. I am proud of the daughter who had the courage to leave so she could find herself. I am proud of the teacher you have become. I am proud simply to know you." She read it 3 times, and each time something in her chest healed a little more. The fissure between them, created by misunderstanding and love expressed imperfectly, began to close. Not healed entirely, some ruptures never fully mend, but integrated, woven into the fabric of both their stories. Chapter 9. The New Bridge, Part 2. Years later, people in the village would speak of Chief Kofi's search for his lost daughter with a kind of reverence usually reserved for epic tales of old. They told the story of how a powerful man had traveled to the great city alone, without guards, without the trappings of his position. They told the story of how he had found his daughter working as a maid, hidden in plain sight, alive and well, and building a new life. They told the story of how his search had changed, not just his daughter but himself. When people asked Chief Kofi about that journey, about the day he found his lost daughter in a mansion in Lagos, working as a maid, he would pause and smile, with a peace that had taken him years to earn. The peace of understanding that you cannot control people you love, that sometimes the greatest gift is letting them go, that sometimes they find their way back to you transformed. "I thought I was searching for my daughter," he would say, his eyes distant, remembering the rain and the gate and the moment of recognition. "I thought I was going to bring her home, to restore order to my household, to fix what I believed I had broken. But what I found was that a daughter who knows herself is worth far more than a daughter who simply obeys. In her humility, I learned my own. In her freedom, I finally became truly wise. I learned that love is not about possession. It is about witnessing. It is about seeing someone fully and letting them be exactly who they need to be." He would pause, and sometimes there would be tears in his eyes. Amara left because she needed to. Ada became who she was always supposed to be. And the greatest miracle is that I was present for both parts of that transformation. I was present for the leaving, painful as it was. And I was present for the becoming, joyful as it was. That is the story I will carry until the end of my life. In Lagos, in a small schoolroom overlooking a bustling neighborhood, Amara would teach her students about dignity and choice and the power of self-determination. She would tell them about running away and about finding yourself. She would tell them that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is disappoint the people who love you in order to become yourself. She received visitors, journalists, scholars, other young women who had also run away, also found themselves in the city, also learned that freedom was worth the price of exile. She established partnerships with schools across the region. She created a program that helped young women get education and job training. She wrote, though privately, about her experience, journals that she would one day publish, articles that would touch thousands of lives. But more importantly, she lived. She lived as Ada, as Amara, as herself, complicated and full and real. She married eventually, not because she was expected to, but because she chose someone who saw her fully and loved her for the choices she had made. She had children, and she raised them with a different kind of love than she had been raised with. A love that included space for them to become themselves, to choose their own paths, to learn from their own journeys. Subscribe for more stories of compassion, courage, and second chances. Thank you for watching. African Chief's daughter ran away to the city as a maid. Her father finally found her. And remember, one act of kindness can rewrite a destiny, but sometimes the greatest act of kindness is the kindness you show yourself by choosing to become who you are meant to be. Epilogue. In the end, it was not the return that mattered most. It was not the dramatic moment of recognition at the gate, not the tearful reunion, not the village gathering to hear her speak. What mattered most was what came after, the quiet, sustained work of rebuilding a relationship, of learning each other again, of allowing space for both the daughter you were and the woman you have become. It mattered that her father learned to ask questions instead of give commands. It mattered that her mother learned to see strength in her daughter's leaving instead of only betrayal. It mattered that Amara learned to forgive her parents for trying to write her story instead of letting her write it herself. It mattered that across 1,000 kilometers they stayed connected, through letters, through occasional visits, through the knowledge that they were both growing, both changing, both learning what it meant to love each other as adults instead of as authority and subject. And it mattered, finally, that somewhere in Lagos, in a small schoolroom, a young woman named Ada taught other young women that they had permission to leave, that they had permission to choose, that they had permission to become themselves, even if that meant disappointing everyone they loved. Because that is the only way to truly come home, by first leaving. By first learning who you are when no one is watching. By first becoming the person you were meant to be. Only then can you return to those you love as your whole self, and only then can they finally see you.